Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we got some more stuff to talk about with Jonathan Gannon. Plus, we're going to take a look at the replacement players for 2023 compared to the 2022 starters. Where do they upgrade? Where do they downgrade on both sides of the ball? All that and more in this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Shout out to the everydayers Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. I'm Louis DiBiase, as always, alongside my co-host, Gino Camilleri, episode 2 after the 2023 NFL Draft. Gino, we do have draft talk in segment 2 and 3. Want to go down the list with you when it comes to starters from last year that were replaced this year, where we think there's upgrades, where we think there's downgrades. But get this, man. Jonathan Gannon actually talked to the media today. I mean, Mr. Media Dodger himself actually talked to the media today about the Eagles' tampering story after the NFC Championship, and I thought everything he said was a load of BS, and I think that should not surprise anybody.
When it comes to serial liars in the National Football League, I don't think anybody has gotten that title that fast.
And he'd probably lie more if he had more opportunities to talk. He just doesn't take them.
Talk about a guy who was born on third base and is just now the head coach of a team that I don't know how long he's going to be the head coach of that team. He seems
shorter than Cliff.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. He's going to be shorter than Cliff, but is he a one and done type of guy? We'll see. And I'm glad he's not here. This episode is talking about the upgrades and downgrades. I think it was a clear upgrade when you go from Jonathan Gannon to Sean Desai. In the blink of an eye, it's an upgrade. And the talk of him being this up-and-coming coach over the last 2 years, I just don't see it. I mean, how do you look at that defense and what you had? Yeah, they had arguably one of the best defenses of all time, but that has a lot to do with the guy that got them there and Howie Roseman and how he assembled this core. And just about any defensive coordinator in the National Football League would have been licking their chops if they had the opportunity to coordinate that defense. And that's why it's an easy sell to anybody. If your coordinator after 2 years, Sean Desai, decides to move on, it's still going to be a foundationally good unit. But nobody has done less with more, in my opinion, in the last 15 years or so in terms of Eagles defenses than Jonathan Gannon. Because if you look at the Juan Castillo days or even the Billy Davis days and even Jim Schwartz, those defenses were either old and aging, too young and too poor, I would say.
Or one position was very weak, like cornerback, right? It was Bradley Fletcher and Kerry Williams. You had to overcompensate for something. You're 100% right. Where this roster on defense, completely loaded. But again, for 2 years, every time Gannon played an elite quarterback or just a good like Derek Carr, Dak Prescott level guy, his defense got shredded, and that was all on him. Gannon today talked at his press conference about how he did say they made a mistake, and he took a call from the Cardinals owner after they won the NFC title, and he said it was short, and that all it was is that Arizona was going to hold on to the head coaching search a little longer and just asked if he was interested. I don't believe that that's all it was. But, Gino, I will say one thing. People are getting mad at this when it comes to, like, from a Super Bowl 57 perspective, as if that's what cost this defense. Like, Jonathan Gannon being distracted is what didn't allow them to stop Patrick Mahomes. Like, no. Don't give him that much credit. This was Jonathan Gannon even at his fullest potential. 2021, 2022, every time he played a player of that caliber at quarterback, his defense always got fired on. So to me, that's one thing is I almost don't like that people are like excusing his performance, saying he was distracted. He just was not prepared and normally never is in those situations.
It's two different conversations. The first one is that it was completely unprofessional. I mean, you have the biggest game, not just of your life, but how selfish is it to put the rest of these guys at any disadvantage against arguably the best coach in the National Football League currently with the best quarterback in the modern game, without a doubt. And I just feel bad for everybody that was on that defense and relied on him at the end of the day. It's a completely unprofessional act, in my opinion. And you just wait. There's the rule for the reason. We know that teams, if they want their guy, they're going to get their guy. And do you think it's like an undrafted free agent that got a call from an area scout and when they hang up, it's all done? No, they're going to wait for you, Jonathan Gannon. Just use your head for a second. But I'm with you, Lou. Even at any adversity that hit this Eagles defense, that was always their downfall. It was always the squeaky floorboard that you're saying, oh, there's no way this floor will ever cave in, right? There's no way this thing will ever cave in. And then starts to get a little creakier. And then a couple more floorboards start to go up and down. And then all of a sudden you have to replace your entire floor because the thing gave out. And that's what the Super Bowl was. And it wasn't just against these even mid to average quarterbacks. There were times when you're playing bad quarterbacks and the game plan just was completely
Look at the Saints
awry.
Game.
Yeah.
Remember the Saints game? I mean, it was like, I think it was Andy Dalton starting, and you would have thought it was Tom Brady.
When Jonathan Gannon was faced with having to outcoach an opponent, it really came down to the guys on the field having to make plays.
That's a great point.
Him.
Is when there were moments you could say on the offensive side of the ball, Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni, that was a beautiful game plan. How many times can you say, there were times this year you could say the defense completely took over, like 100%. But when can you say, like the end of the Jaguars game or the game against Washington when they sacked Wentz like 100 times? But when did you say this year or 2021, that was a Jonathan Gannon masterpiece? I don't think I ever once said that.
And the most damning thing of it all was the back-to-back touchdown plays that were the exact same plays, just opposite ways on the field, where they use that little break route where they go out and then they come back against the grain, and the Chiefs score 2 touchdowns on that. And why you're not identifying your own tendencies to break those tendencies, which Andy Reid said, we recognized this when we were watching film. They didn't adjust for it. Well, they didn't adjust for it in game either, and it ended up costing
wide
them.
Open touchdowns, literally
wide open. There couldn't have been more wide open. The same exact play.
They just said, let's just flip the field. Let's go this way now, and it worked. It was unbelievable. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad Gannon at least had to, face the music, but I still don't believe most of what he said at that press conference. And let's definitely say we're not rooting for the Arizona Cardinals in 2023 for sure. Gino, when it comes to 2023, though, the Eagles roster looks pretty damn good after the 2023 NFL draft. There are some holes that they had to replace from 2022 starters. Where are their upgrades? Where are their downgrades? At least on paper. We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. And guys, today's show is sponsored by FanDuel, the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network, and the NBA. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. We just saw Joel Embiid win the MVP a few hours ago. As we're recording, LeBron James versus Steph Curry, part 1,000 right now in the second round between the Lakers and Warriors. Bet on it all at FanDuel, because right now new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. You get great promotions every day. It's a safe and secure app, and you get paid instantly. So check it out. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Eagles fans, we are continuing on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Shout out to the everydayers, Monday through Friday. Gino, we are diving in now to some upgrades and downgrades. The 2023 draft is officially over. I think the Eagles did as good as they have ever done, at least in our lifetimes as Eagles fans. And so me and you have both agreed, like when you look at the 2022 roster, it's maybe the best in franchise history. It is extremely talented. There were almost no holes this year. I mean, honestly, where were the weak points of that roster? It was all on special teams. And that's why they almost faced no adversity during the regular season. They had the first round bye. They make it to the NFC title. They make it all the way to the Super Bowl and nearly win it. It's one of the greatest teams I've ever seen. And so you lose some players from that team. And I think the replacements were excellent, as good as you can do on paper, but where are their upgrades and downgrades? So I want to start there with you, and let's start on the offensive side of the football, where there was definitely less movement. So you look at Isaac Seumalo signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Miles Sanders signs with the Carolina Panthers. So those are the two holes that they had to fill. When it comes to right guard and running back, did they upgrade over Seumalo and Sanders, or do you think those are downgrades?
Isaac Seumalo is going to go down as one of the most underrated Eagles in the history of the franchise,
he was
in my opinion.
Last year, dude.
Without a doubt. And he was so good that you just never heard his name. And that's exactly what you want out of an offensive lineman. And
it's like offensive linemen, corners, defensive backs. If you don't hear anything, that's good news.
Next year, we'll see the direction that they do go. Is it Cam Jurgens? Is Tyler Steen the guy? Does Jack Driscoll have a chance to compete there as well?
Those will be the 3 options, yeah.
Until I see it on the field, it is tough to say, but right now I'm going to say it is a downgrade. Isaac Seumalo got the money that he is worth. You're going to get a compensatory selection back from him as well. It would have been great to have him, but hats off to Isaac Seumalo, who signed one of the most team-friendly deals ever when he signed his extension.
He deserved
with the Eagles.
to get
He made pennies.
Way more, yeah.
He got his bag right now in Pittsburgh. He's only going up the street down to the other conference in Pennsylvania. But who's going to be the guy that climbs up and takes his spot on the roster? We'll see. I think that's a clear downgrade.
Yeah.
Running back, I'd have to say
the three.
It's an upgrade in my opinion.
It's an upgrade. Yeah, I agree.
And especially since Miles Sanders has been next to non-existent when it comes to the passing game over the last couple years after his marvelous 2019 season.
Yeah.
Does getting Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott, even now with DeAndre Swift, who is a pure pass catching back as well, allow you to open up more elements of that running back by committee approach, which they were going to do anyway.
Yeah, I think you're more dynamic. You keep the explosive, because Miles Sanders last year was incredible. A career year, over 1,200 rushing yards. Explosive plays still were there. He's one of the best home run hitters at his position. But so is Rashaad Penny. So was DeAndre Swift. We saw that firsthand last year, week 1, against Detroit. So you keep that explosive ability. You keep the efficiency. Miles Sanders every year was averaging over 4.5 yards per carry. Well, Rashaad Penny the last 2 years has averaged over 6 yards a pop. Swift last year was at 5.5. So you keep that. As you mentioned, Swift is a much more dynamic pass catcher, as is the increased workload of Kenneth Gainwell, Rashaad Penny as well, and Boston Scott. And so, yeah, like Miles Sanders versus just Rashaad Penny, I take Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders versus just DeAndre Swift, I take DeAndre Swift. But the money combined between all 5 of these guys in your backfield is still under Sanders. So you almost got to count it as, okay, we took the Sanders money and we did all of this. To me, I'd much rather have this backfield with all 4 of these players than just Miles Sanders. So I agree with you. I would say clearly Seumalo is going to be a downgrade this year, but I think it's an upgrade from Sanders.
And let's not act like Miles Sanders played every game in his time in Philadelphia. He had a couple knocks on him as well.
He's missed more games, I think, than Swift over the last 2 years.
Has he?
It's close, because Swift was not. Rashaad Penny has missed consistently 6-7 games a year. Swift last year only missed 2 or 3.
That's what I was thinking, and you're going to get a more explosive element. And as good as Miles Sanders was, after 2019, when we were saying, okay, if this guy continues his trajectory to be that Christian McCaffrey light, which it's funny that full circle, that conversation brought him all the way back to Carolina to inevitably replace Christian McCaffrey. He just doesn't have that passing game element to him to where the Eagles could trust him. And he had a little bit last year. It was starting to come back, but Boston Scott is just smooth when it comes to the pass game, and Kenny Gainwell has so much untapped potential in that department. And DeAndre Swift, we're going to see a pass catching back that I don't think we've seen that dynamic type of ability in quite some time. Yeah, you have to believe so.
Because you had Sproles, of course, but as you mentioned, that's just one element, and you had the run game. But yeah, outside of 2019 Miles Sanders, you have not seen that running back that can literally do it all, and Swift might be the closest thing since. I did look at the games played for both. So DeAndre Swift, 2020, 13 games, 2021, 13 games, 2022, 14. So he normally missed on average 3 to 4 games. Miles Sanders played all 17 last year and all 16 in 2019. But in 2020 and 2021, he only played 12 games each. So he missed 5 games and 4. So actually, he's missed more games total than Swift. So in that way,
narratives. That's how it is.
Exactly. And so, and like I mentioned, and you mentioned it yesterday, 2 injury-prone running backs like Swift and Penny, they'll combine. You got to imagine at least one of them's available for all 17. And if not, you got Kenny G.
Let's break it down. Yeah, exactly.
Break
it down.
3 and 4 you can have.
You ran with Kenny G in Boston 2 seasons ago. You had Boston in that rotation as well.
Right.
And you were saying, okay, he could be a number 2 for you.
Boston was your 2 in 2019.
Exactly. He was. And he just is going to continue to be that number 3 for you, and maybe even a number 4 that is one of the best in the league. And now you're going
4. Oh my God.
Even if you get 13 games out of DeAndre Swift, you could get 4 out of Rashaad Penny, right? Like that's what you're hoping for. And it's no worse than Miles Sanders in those 2 years when you were relying on him to make a deep stretch and a deep run. So, hey, I'm with you in the terms of an upgrade. You don't have to pay as much. You now have 4 different guys instead of just Miles Sanders, who is that one explosive guy who's going to get the ball in the run game. You can really do everything with these 4 guys, in my opinion.
Exactly.
They're all going to be pass catching backs. Rashaad Penny, speaking of an underrated type of category as pass catcher, he is pretty freaking good.
There you go. Gino, these are more depth spots, but when you look at wide receiver, you replace Zach Pascal with Olamide Zaccheaus. I mean, it's pretty close, probably the same tier of player, but Zaccheaus is more of a downfield threat. I think he's more of a threat run after the catch. So I would say upgrade.
And he can block. Yeah. And he had his best season with who now currently is your backup quarterback in Marcus Mariota.
Who I think is an upgrade over Gardner Minshew as well.
Oh, also offense. As well. Yeah, so shout out to Olamide Zaccheaus because he had his best season with a journeyman Marcus Mariota.
We're going to have to call him OZ, man, because I'm never going to get that name.
Yeah,
right.
We're going to butcher it every single time. But OZ, I think it's a clear upgrade over Zach Pascal because when Pascal was in, outside of those short underneath routes where you knew he could have been schemed up a little bit. Yeah, it was the same
route he would catch it every time.
Yep, exactly. That little like sneak leak.
Just the bailout on the sideline.
The slot leak. Yeah, exactly. And now you're going to have OZ who could truly maybe make a run to even replace Quez Watkins. It was clear that Zach Pascal was going to be your 4. At no point was he a threat to take away those receiving reps from Quez Watkins. OZ truly might be that guy. He went over 500 yards last year, if I'm not mistaken, with Marcus Mariota. Yep. So, hey, man, you get 2,500 yards out of Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and OZ. That's a pretty solid trio right there.
Or at least, like we mentioned with Swift and Penny, if you combine Quez and Zaccheaus and you get a certain floor, that'll be perfect. I think Zaccheaus will be much more involved in the passing game this year than Pascal was in 2022. Definitely. So I would say you add Mariota to in this RPO type of offense. He's a mobile quarterback. He fits better than Minshew. The only spot I would say they downgraded on offense is, again, starting right guard, going from Isaac Seumalo to either Tyler Steen, Cam Jurgens, or Jack Driscoll. There was a lot more movement on the defensive side of the football, Gino, so we'll get into that coming up next, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles, talking upgrades versus downgrades. 2022 starters that left. Who did the Eagles replace them with, upgrades or downgrades? On offense, we said they upgraded when it comes to running back, DeAndre Swift and Rashaad Penny over Miles Sanders. We said they upgraded at receiver with Olamide Zaccheaus over Zach Pascal. They upgraded at backup quarterback, Marcus Mariota over Gardner Minshew, but they did downgrade going from Isaac Seumalo at right guard to Cam Jurgens or Tyler Steen or Jack Driscoll, whoever wins that battle in camp. When it comes to defense, Gino, a lot more movement here. Let's start with the defensive line. You lose Javon Hargrave, signs a $20+ million a year contract with the enemy, with San Francisco, which is tough, and you replace him with Jalen Carter, one of the best players in the draft. This one is maybe the toughest because Carter's ceiling, I think, is higher than Hargrave, but do we expect him to be what Hargrave was last year right away? I'm not sure.
If we're projecting out the future, I would say it's an upgrade.
Future, then it's an upgrade. But for 2023 itself, I would probably say, at least for now, downgrade.
have to believe it would be a downgrade because
Hargrave was like the best pass rushing DT in the league.
We're not going to sit here and say just because he went to San Francisco that he was a bad player.
Hargrave
he was excellent, man. Down the stretch, he was elite when it came to his pass rush. He was just unstoppable, and the Eagles signed him for a reason. And that 3-year deal going back, you're saying, man, what if they only signed it for 6 years, though? Like, you could have got him for a lot less, probably, and he probably would have still been in Philadelphia. But to talk about a value signing, somebody who completely outplayed what their contract was, and you're going to get a third-round compensatory pick for a reason. The guy is baller. Jalen Carter in the future, could he be that guy? Could he be the next Fletcher Cox, the franchise pillar? We've said it time and time again. I believe so. But for 2023, it's going to be a tough sell to say, Jalen Carter is a clear upgrade right away.
Let's stay at DT because you also lost, or at least I don't imagine you're going to bring him back at this point with all of your additions, Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph. And you replace them with Kentavious Street, and you bring in Moro Ajomo in the 7th round from Texas. You also got Tui Peloto coming back if he makes the roster. I think, again, right away, I don't know, I would even say right away, I would much rather have Street and Ajomo over what Suh and Joseph were last year. Suh made a few plays, and I thought Joseph, right when he came in, was good. I did think he fell off as the season went on. So I like the youth there, and I think you have way more pass rush ability with these two.
And to add in, I think Marlon Tuipulotu was coming into his own last year before he suffered that injury. He lost all that weight in the offseason. He come back and he looked explosive. And add on to that, Lou, are you going to open up more snaps potentially to add Milton Williams in there and some sort of a NASCAR look?
Yeah.
Open up a Nolan Smith on the interior type of role, taking those guys off of the field. Against the run, it's definitely going to be tough to say that those guys are going to be easily replaced by a young Jalen Carter, a Marlon Tuipulotu coming back off of injury. But also Jordan Davis is going to pick up a lot of those reps as well. And we have to count for him in all of this equation as well. And I think letting Jordan Davis cook is the formula next year. Let him defend the run and allow him to be that 3-down guy that you were hoping for, because you're not just going to put him out there to be a run-stopping back again, or a run-stopping interior defensive line.
No, he's got to take a step.
He has to evolve towards that Dexter Lawrence type of capability where you're constantly putting 2 guys on him to stop him from penetrating the pocket. And he'll get there, especially with Jalen Carter now and Fletcher Cox. Just give him more reps. Right now, losing those veterans, it is definitely tough. And I thought they were playing well in the midst of that season. In the future, I'm going to just keep saying, in the future, I agree that this is the upgrade.
Next year, though, man, Street was really good with New Orleans last year. I mean, he had a great pass rushing season, and Ajomo's a 7th rounder. Who knows?
You're going to suffer against the run, but the pass rush is going to definitely take a bump.
Again, that's why you got the big man. That's why you got Jordan Davis for a reason. So I'll actually say upgrade for next year. Gino, on the edge, I don't think it's even close what Robert Quinn was last year for you versus Nolan Smith, even as a rookie. That's a huge upgrade.
And Derek Barnett as well. You can kick him out of town that you thought you were going to go into that season with him making any sort of contribution. You could even say Barnett replacing Quinn is probably an upgrade.
I mean, I don't know, because at least Robert Quinn didn't give you some boneheaded penalties. Doesn't matter. DB is getting cut. Honestly, Gino, I forgot he was on the team.
He was.
Until the week before the draft.
And I want Kyron Johnson to be on the team due to special teams and he has a niche, that speed that they don't have, that pure speed guy. That's him. That's all he knows is speed. Same with Patrick Johnson, who has been good against the run for you as well. Those guys have a role on this team. Edge is just, how can you say that it's going to get better over last year? And it truly, in my opinion,
it really could. Yeah, that's the exciting part. Gino, at linebacker, you replace both starters. TJ Edwards is in Chicago, Kazir White in Arizona. You replace them with Nakobe Dean and Nicholas Morrow. I would say upgrade when it comes to Dean over Edwards or White. I would say, though, Morrow is probably not a huge downgrade, but he's a downgrade from what White and Edwards were last year. So I'll say Dean's ceiling is way higher. And last year he already flashed when he finally got chances later in the season. I think it's upgrade for Dean, downgrade with Morrow.
If I'm going what I see the outlook of those guys playing, I think Morrow, he's more suited to probably be that middle linebacker. Dean, just with his frame and
Edwards, do you think more?
In my opinion, just Dean is you have to remember he's 5'11", right? Like that's
right.
going to be tough to fill all those gaps over and over and over and over again at that size. Off ball is probably better suited for him, but that's not a bad thing because he can track sideline to sideline. You're going to have better ability beyond what Kaiser White gave you when it comes to just chasing outside of the hashes. Kaiser White was great. TJ Edwards was great. It was the best linebacking duo that you had. Clear downgrade when it comes to Nick Morrow. You're hoping that you can get something out of him. It's a 1-year deal. You're hoping that maybe even Sean Bradley can take a step up a little bit to give you some snaps there. But Nakobe Dean has a position on this team, and he should have had a position on this team last year, in my opinion. Yeah, he absolutely does.
And as much as TJ Edwards improved last year and as much as Kaiser White was solid, neither one of them have the ceiling of Dean. And I think the floor is extremely high too, especially with all these Georgia players now. He's, we talk about how it's going to benefit all the rookies, but it's going to benefit Dean too, having all those guys in front of him. He knows how to flow off of those players. So I would say upgrade with Dean, downgrade with Morrow. And then we head into the safeties, where there's 2 new starters. You lose Marcus Epps to Vegas. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson goes to Detroit. And CGJ led the league in interceptions. Sucks that he's not back. I think it's definitely a downgrade with whoever you want to say. Sidney Brown, Terrell Edmonds, Reed Blankenship. CGJ not being here still, that one stings.
Say downgrade at both. Maybe in the future, Sidney Brown can have that
if it's
star
Edmonds
potential.
Versus Epps, probably a wash. Epps was
I don't think
good though last year.
Edmonds can't cover as well as Marcus Epps did. Marcus Epps really had a niche role on this team to be that bigger nickel type of back where he did a lot of what Chauncey did, but at the same time, he was a much better run defender, in my opinion. Yeah. Chauncey came on late when it came to defending the run, but Marcus was there all the times. How many times did he come up and fill gaps for you on big downs where it's like 3rd and 1 and he makes a stop? It's going to be tough to replace him. And at that value contract that the Raiders gave him too, I think the Eagles should have got in on that one, especially since they lost Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as well. But now you got to go into this year and find a way to supplant them. And hopefully Sidney Brown can come in and be maybe a rare instant impact rookie in the defensive secondary for the Eagles for the first time in quite a while. It's been quite some time.
Somebody scared me on Twitter, and they said, I hope Sidney Brown isn't just Kavon Wallace, which was a pick that we all loved in 2020, and it didn't work out. And it's true, because I loved the Kavon Wallace pick. But I do not think this will be different player. I don't think we will suffer that same fate. The good news is, Gino, we just broke down all of the new starters replacing 2022 guys on offense and defense, and there were some downgrades for sure, like right guard and the safety position and, some spots at linebacker and DT, but the majority of them are at least on paper upgrades, and it's going to be tough to top last year's team. But the fact that a year later you have that much turnover and you almost look better is super exciting.
It might not be right away, but give this team time. I think you'll start to see the payoff of the moves that they've made in the last calendar year and a half, probably 6 to 7 games into the season.
And it's going to help longer term, as you kept mentioning, is for the future, they look better.
It's not the Seth Rogen meme where he takes the duct tape and this is the end and puts it over the crack of concrete like those Band-Aid signings of 2017, 2018, and so on. These are true pieces that are going to help you fill in the cracks that you had lost. And that's why the conversation does get tough, because that's what they're saying in those meeting rooms when you're saying, okay, who are we going to re-sign? Is it going to be him, or are we going to try and draft somebody? Well, right away, it might not be what we want, but we think that the ceiling can take us to where we want to get to. And I see the vision that Howie Roseman has in what he has done here.
What do you guys think? Upgrade, downgrade, 2023 roster versus 2022? Hit us up on Twitter at LockedOnBirds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase. LOE will be with you again Wednesday through Thursday. Shout out to the everydayers, even in the dead zone, for listening to us 5 days a week. Birds Talk never stops. Thanks for making us a part of your day, your first listen every day. Again, all podcast platforms in video form as well on YouTube. As always, guys, thanks so much for tuning into the show. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go, Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.